Kache kachim shechitasan sheshachtan b'rosh hamizbeach. What if you didn't shech the kache kachim where you were supposed to shech it, rather you shecht it on the mizbeach? Rabbi Yosy Omer keilu nishkatu b'tzaf. The mizbeach, if you shecht on the mizbeach, it's like you shechted it on the tzafin. It's also a mokaim that's good for shechita. Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda Omer mechatzi hamizbeach l'darim is kedarim. It depends where on the Mizbeach you shechted. Now, the Gemara is going to get into a discussion about the positioning of the Mizbeach, because logic would dictate if the Mizbeach is kula b'tzafayin, then shechting on top of the Mizbeach should be good at tzafayin. And if the Mizbeach is exactly in the middle of the Yazara, where it's half tzafin, half Durham, then Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda would make a lot of sense. But we're going to hear that's not pshat. Amar Rabasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabasi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and we're going to be discussing what he said all day today. Amar Hayer Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yosy used to say, so he's saying this in Rabbi Yosy, although he never heard it from Rabbi Yosy, rather Gemara Gomer La Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says this is not forced in the Mishnah anywhere, but as I became to my rabbi that this is pshat in Rabbi Yosy of our Mishnah. Amar Hayer Rabbi Yosy, Kulei Mizbeach B'tzafin. The entire Mizbeach was B'tzafin. So that's why if you shecht anywhere on the Mizbeach, it's Ki'ilu Nishchatu B'tzafin, because you're in the Tzafin. Correct the Morris, and then it's not Ki'ilu Nishchatu B'tzafin. You have shechted B'tzafin. That's where you are. So Zok to Gemara, Umay Ki'ilu. Zok to Gemara, Mao Detema, you would think, but Al Yerach, the pasuk says, where do you shechted Al Yerach HaMizbeach Tzfayna? Means it has to be Tzfayna, but it also has to be beside the Mizbeach. Veleka, when you're on the Mizbeach, you're not beside the Mizbeach. Kamash Malon Rabbi Yosy, that on the Mizbeach counts for Tzafin because on the Mizbeach is the Tzafin. Amar le Rab Zeir le Rabasi. So Rab Zeir told Rabasi, if that's how you're going to learn Pshat in Rabbi Yosy, then I have a problem. Because what about the next Shita of the Mishnah? So then you're going to have to conclude that the reason why Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda holds, it depends upon where on the Mizbeach you are. That's where you would be considered either B'tzafin or B'darim. So then are you going to be forced to learn based on your Mahalach that according to Rabbi Yosy Bar Yehuda, the Mizbeach was dead center, and then in fact, basically the whole Machlokes in our Mishnah is where the Mizbeach was positioned. The Chitema Hachanami, and if you're going to suggest that yes, that is the Machlokes, it can't be. We are atu the Amrit, because you, Rab Asi, said Mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan, so you said another member in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and that is Moidi Rabbi Yosy Rabbi Yehuda Shimshachton Kinegdon Bekarka Psula. If you shechted on the karka in those same locations, it would be possible, meaning you're not considered the tzafin, even on the tzafin side of the Mizbeach. So clearly, being on the Mizbeach and what the top of the Mizbeach is considered cannot depend on where the Mizbeach is situated. There must be psukim to tell us that the top of the Mizbeach is not based on where it's physically located. Rather, the top of the Mizbeach must have special qualities that make it considered tzafin or dorim or whatever. Amarlei, so Rab Asi answered back, Hachi ka'amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what Rabbi Yochanan said. Shneya mikra echad darshu. In fact, there's a special b'zeres hakasuv that determines the status of the top surface of the Mizbeach. It says in the pasuk, Mizbach Adama Tasali. V'zavachta love. This is at the end of, I believe, Parshas Yisroi. No? Yeah, I believe it's the end of Parshas Yisroi. Mizbach Adama Tasali. V'zavachta love v'telosecha v'shlomecha es tzayincha v'spikarecha b'chol ha'mokoim asher askir hashemi avoy elecha u'vayachticha. So we learn v'zavachta olav v'telosecha v'shlomecha. That's telling you that it's a mokim kosher l'shchita. The top of the Mizbeach is a mokim kosher l'shchita, regardless of where the footprint of the Mizbeach stands, b'tzafin ha'adar. It's a zone in unto itself. And now, what is the machlokes? How do we understand this passage? It says anywhere on it as which means that if you can shecht your oilos on it, it must have a status of tzafin. Shlomim, you're allowed to shech b'tzafon. We already learned that. So therefore, the whole Mizbeach must have a status of tzafon. But Rabbi Yosy bar Yehuda suffer, no. When it says what the pasuk is saying, and logic is that would be the northern half. The that would be the southern half. Nothing to do with where the Mizbeach is located. It's the Torah dictating the status of the top of the Mizbeach. Why would Rabbi Yosy touch the pasuk as to mean splitting the service of the Mizbeach in half? Why not learn like Rabbi Yosy, who we're soon going to see is Rabbi Yosy ben Chalafta? Why would we not learn like him that the whole top of the Mizbeach is good for both oilers and shlomims? Zok the Gemara, the Yisrael daita kulala oila kosher. If you're going to hold like Rabbi Yosy, that the whole top of the Mizbeach is kosher to shecht and oila pan. Hashta kulala oila kosher. If the Torah says v'zavakta lo v'shelasecha, so why did the Torah have to speak out v'shlomecha? If it's kosher la'oila, meaning it has a status of tzofin, kulay l'shlomim b'boy, so the Torah could have just said v'zavachta lo v'shelasecha, and I would have known that you could check the shlomim there. But the Torah speaks out as ha'lesecha v'shlomecha. It must be to tell you that there are certain areas of the Mizbech where you can shech the oila, and there are certain areas of the Mizbech where you can only shech the shlomim. The idach, that's a good kasha. So according to Rabbi Yosy, who learns the entire top of the Mizbech is oilasecha and shlomecha, why did it say shlomecha? It could have just said oilasecha, and I would have known by myself shlomecha as well, because itzrich, I need the Torah to speak up shlomecha as well. You know why? There are many more karbanos oila, Rashi says, than there are karbanos shlomim, and the carbon oila is much more limited as to where it can be shechted. It cannot be shechted b'chamok and bazar. It could only be shechted on the tzafon. And we're working with the shita that tzafon doesn't even mean the whole northern half of the Azara. It means only the immediate area that's directly north of the Mizbeach. So oil is confined to such a small space. So and therefore it has exclusivity only to shecht oil. Maybe you cannot shecht it on top of the Mizbeach at all. You would think you could not check the shlamim on top of the Mizbeach. It's an area reserved exclusively for oilers. Kamashal that it's both. Let's have a look at Rashi. The place to shecht an oiler is very limited. Because the oiler is confined to a very small area. Sometimes there's a lot of oilers happening. And there's simply not enough space in the small area directly to the north of the Mizbeach. So the Torah gave the oila a relief area to shecht on top of the Mizbeach. But maybe that doesn't apply to Shlomim. Kamash Shalom, that applies to Shlomim as well. But the entire top of the Mizbeach, according to Rabbi Yosy, has the status of the tzafon, irregardless of where physically the Mizbeach is. But the Gemara is now going to get into a conversation as to where was the Mizbeach actually. Gufa. What does it mean imshachton kenegdon bekarka psulos? What does it mean? My kenegdon bekarka. So Rashi says before we even get into the Gemara's suggestions of possible explanations to kenegdon bekarka, we first have to rule out it can't mean beside the Mizbeach, to the right or to the left. You know why? Because we're working with the shita over here that the tzafon area that you're allowed to shech kachim is the area immediately to the north of the Mizbeach, not east of the Mizbeach and not west of the Mizbeach. Right? That was one of the three shitas. So if that's the case, it for sure can't be referring to the right side or the left side of the Mizbeach, because that's for sure out of the zone. Elamai, as a plan B, maybe it's referring to Ilema Amo Yesoid and Amo Soiviv. Maybe Kenegdon Bekarka means you didn't shecht directly on the top surface of the Mizbeach, which we said is only 28 by 28. You shechted on either the Soivev or the Yesoid, where it protrudes, where the sides of the Mizbeach protrude past the top surface. But frankly, Gemara, Hagufe Mizbeachu. The fact is that has a status of a Mizbeach. So there should be absolutely no difference between shechting on the Yesoid, shechting on the Soivev, or shechting on the top of the Mizbeach. So that's not a consideration either. V'oid, the words are connected bekarka. My connected bekarka. You can't learn it's referring to the soivev and the yisoid because that's not called connected bekarka. So again, what did Rabbi Yossi Yehuda mean when he said shachton connected bekarka psulos? V'chitema the ovid mechilos bekarka v'shachet v'hu. And if you're going to tell me that if you tunnel underneath the Mizbeach, so then you are in the footprint of the Mizbeach, but you're not on the Mizbeach, and that's what it means connected bakarka. You tunneled under the Mizbeach. We have a Mizbeach. Wouldn't that disqualify the whole Mizbeach? Because now the Mizbeach is not sitting squarely on the ground. It's sitting on some underground tunnel structure. But Tanya we learned, Mizbeach Adama Ta'asali, and we dash in Mizbeach Adama, Shemechuber Ba'adama. I think the Adama is that the Sionim changes to from the Shittim Mekavetzes. So it has to be Mechuber Ba'adama, meaning Shelo Yivnenu, Lo Al Gaba Mechilos, not on top of tunnels, but Lo Al Gaba Keeping and not on top of dome structures, arch structures to support it.
Isn't it the karka? Wouldn't that be the Adama that we're talking about? What other karka is there?
I'm not understanding.
What does it mean?
When it says connect on Bakarka, it has to be to the ground.
It has to what?
But it has to be referring to the area directly beneath the Mizbeach.
Okay, so we must be talking about the Mishkan, not the Beis Hamikdash, right?
Because it's stone, you mean?
Yeah, it's stone.
The stone surface?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't tunnel underneath. The stone is just a tile, isn't it? It wasn't like 4 feet deep, the stone. It was just a tile. You could take the tile off and dig underneath.
Okay, who would do that? I mean, we're talking about the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
that there's so many things that we learn about, like who would do that? I don't know. Who would stand outside the Mizbeach with a long knife and shech from 50 feet away? I don't know.
So we're talking about, okay.
But we do know there were excavations underneath the Mizbeach. We know that there was a reservoir or a cistern below the Mizbeach that would gather all the wine.
But it all had functions. But the function to shecht is in the Azara.
Right. So the question is, would it be mutter to shecht below the Mizbeach?
So that's what it means, karka? That's one of the possibilities.
We're going to reject that in just a minute because the Gemara says that would undermine the kashrus of the Mizbeach. Yeah. So the Gemara rejects that.
And the keneged part, what does that mean?
That's what we're still looking for. So the answer is Latricha de Batcher B'Tzurei. What if for some reason they built a Mizbeach that was smaller than the appropriate footprint? The Mizbeach was supposed to be 32 amos by 32 amos. What if for some reason they made a smaller Mizbeach? So now you're on the ground where the Mizbeach should have been, but it's not because the Mizbeach is undersized. That's what Rabbi Yosy Yehuda meant, that Kenegdon Bekarka would be possible. So Rashi is the Batcher B'Tzurei, Im Nimlach Lekatzer Mizbeach. Again, why would someone do that? Who knows? But for some reason, the person building the Mizbeach decided that he's making it smaller. And instead of making it 32 by 32, you made it 32 by 16. So the Mizbeach only fills the southern portion of its footprint, but the northern portion of its footprint there's no Mizbeach there. Could you shech on the ground over there, because that's north of the Mizbeach, it's Al Yerech Mizbeach Tzafayna, but it's also directly in what the footprint of the Mizbeach should have been. Yes, it's completely hypothetical. The Shachat Sham Tzulois. The Ablagav the Yerechu, the Maisa, it's Yerech, the Maisa, it's right beside Mizbeach, possibly. Amos Virle B'Dar Marzarahu. So this proves that the Mizbeach was in the Dar Marzara, the Eloya my possibly. What would be so bad if you shechted directly on the north footprint of where the Mizbeach should have been? That's Tzofan. It must be that the whole Mizbeach was all the way in the south, and even the north part of that footprint was also not in the north. And that's how the Gemara wants to remain with understanding Rabbi Yosy Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yosy, it doesn't matter, it's the whole top, and according to Rabbi Yosy Yehuda, the way Rabbi Yochanan is explaining is that the Mizbeach was kuloi b'darim, and without this kuloi b'darim, if you made the Mizbeach smaller and you shechted on the ground where the Mizbeach should have been, that would not be a kosher shechita. It's considered b'dar. I mean, we always ask that question. It's so unlikely. It's so hypothetical. But the Gemara does that. The Gemara is always asking. It's funny. Yeah, thank you very much. It's funny because when everything Gemara discusses halacha that's not like now, it's a name when Mashiach comes. The Gemara figures out, hey, why are you discussing halacha? It's not like now. But to discuss a case that never happened and never will, that the Gemara is happy to discuss. I don't understand how these things work. But it's funny, right? When you discuss something that's Nagaya, when Mashiach comes, the Gemara freaks out. Why are you talking? We don't talk about those things. But this, which is never going to happen, that the Gemara discusses. So I don't know the answer, but it's very interesting to point out. Zog to Gemara Vater. Amar B'Zeir, Efsher Isa Laha de Rabbi Yochanan, V'loy Tadila B'Masnisen. Rabbi Yochanan, which Ravasi said over in his name, is saying a pretty big kiddush, right? He's saying that the Omer Haya Rabbi Yosy Kulay Mizbeach B'Tzafan. He's saying in Rabbi Yosy that the whole Mizbeach was on the Tzafan, and for some reason you don't find it in the Forest. Like such a profound statement should definitely have been included somewhere in Meforish in our Mishnah. If Rabbi Yochanan said that in fact that the whole Mizbeach was B'Tzafan, it's not likely that it wouldn't have been Merumas anywhere in the Mishnah somewhere. So Zog to Gemara, after Isa Lad Rabbi Yochanan Lotaninu Laba Mastisen, Zog to Gemara Nofak Dok Va'ashrach, my favorite term. So they went out and they actually found a Mishnah from where you can prove that Rabbi Yosef holds that the Mizbeach was Kuloi B'Tzafan. Now here's where it gets complicated. The Tanan we learned. Biru Misham Ate Te'eda Yofim. He went into the Holzkammer, into the Lishka where they stored wood for the Mizbeach, and they took beautiful wood, Ate Te'ena, wood from a fig tree. The Rashi brings down Vos Epis, they took wood from a fig tree. So Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi says, they would, you know what they would burn the karbanis with? They would have to use wood from a fig tree. What's up is a fig tree? The Tamagoda who Shaboy Haisa Takana Lodam Rishon Vyasalam Figurais. Right? The Pasuk said Hashem took alay te'ena, leaves of a fig tree. So that's why I'm not sure why we want to remember that particular incident, but that's why we use wood from a fig tree. So the Tnan Biru Misham Ate Te'ena. Yofim, nice, clean wood. Leseder Marocha Shnia Shel Ketores. Now there were multiple bonfires. There was the main big Marocha where they would burn their karbanis. We're not referring to that now. We're talking about a smaller little bonfire that was made on the Mizbeach, and that's where they took the fire to burn Ketores. Right? They would burn Ketores twice a day. They would burn Ketores on Yom Kippur. Where did they get the fire from? They would take the fire from a bonfire that was on the Mizbeach Chitzoni. Where did they place this little bonfire? Keneged Keren Ma'aravos Droimus. So when you're walking up the ramp and you get to the top of the Mizbeach, it should be immediately to your left, which should be the southwest corner. But it wasn't right up against the corner. Moshech Muna Keren Klapit Sofen Arba Amis. There were 4 amis, so they left blank space of 4 amis, and then 4 amis to the north of the top southern edge of the Mizbeach is where they place this mini Marocha, and the Gemara is going to go to great lengths to understand why it was placed specifically over there. They put enough wood so that they would be able to have remaining, after they light it on fire, 5 saw of coal, and Rashi goes through exactly how much coal they needed to do. Each saw is 6 kav, and they would typically need 3 kav of gecholim for each sreifas ketores. So there was plenty there, so you could easily shovel some and get the coals that you need. On Shabbos, they put in even more wood into this bonfire so that they would be left with 8 saw of gecholim. Why do you need an extra 5? Shisha hayunoist shesham hayunoistin shnei baziche levoina shalechem upon. Where did they burn the levoina that was changed out when they changed the lechem upon him on the Mizbeach HaChitzon? And they burnt it in coals that was taken from the Mizbeach HaChitzon, and they needed extra coals because of that. Umay simna, and this is the crux of what we're learning today. Umay simna, so Rashi, mawa simin shehukva lahem l'maracha shniya ula aktaris habazichin karen ma'ravus jeroimis. Vosap is this specific location for the mini maracha. Why dafka on the west side of the Mizbeach, 4 amos north of the bottom, 4 amos north of the south side of the Mizbeach? Where does that location come from? The reason why the maracha was in this position is because it's going according to Rabbi Yosy. Who is saying this? Rabbi Zeir. Rabbi Zeir is saying, from this Mishnah, we know that it's going according to Rabbi Yosy, and that's why this maracha is precisely positioned over here. And now let's get into the details. The Tanya we learned. Rabbi Yosy used to say, Zeh siman. Here's a good siman as to where things need to be. It's a little bit of a cryptic message, but the Gemara is going to decipher. Kol hanitel b'fnim li nasein b'chutz. Anything that's taken from the inside of the heichal to be presented b'chutz, let's call it for now the Mizbeach HaChitzoni, einay nitein el b'samoch she'ein lifnim. Where on the Mizbeach HaChitzon are you going to do whatever you need to do with something that comes from the heichal? It's going to be as close as possible to the heichal as possible, so that you're traveling the shortest distance between the heichal and the Mizbeach. On the flip side, anything that you're taking from the Mizbeach HaChitzoni and ultimately you're going to deliver it into the heichal, such as the coals that you need for the ketayros, right? You have to pick it from a place on the Mizbeach that's as close as possible to your destination, to the heichal. Now, right away, we know why it's on the south side. But we know right away why it's on the west side of the Mizbeach, because the westernmost side of the Mizbeach is closest to the heichal. Okay. What are we referring to? Mind Shirayim, if we're talking about the Shirayim, we know there was Shiari Hadam from the Paris that they were makriv in the Heichol, whether it's the partial Yom Kippurim, whether they're the Paris of Apayam Dojol Tzibur or Parkoy Mashiach. The Torah says, what do you do with the Shiari Adam? You pour it on the Yisoid. Which Yisoid do you pour it on? The Yisoid that's Al Pnei Pesach Hayel Moed, that's closest to the Heichol, which is the western Yisoid, is what we said. So Ilay Mishirayim, if this cryptic message that Rabbi Yosy is referring to is the Shiari Adam of dam that needs to be spritzed with heichal, why do I need this cryptic message for? The Torah says it black and white. So it's not logical to say that Rabbi Yosy is offering some cryptic message about this dam when it's a mefurish apostle. Visu, what does the other case mean? Minute. If it's talking about the gecholim that were taken off the Mizbeach HaChitzon to be marked with the Ketores of Yom Kippurim l'fnai v'l'fnim, behedyiksivuhu v'lokach molei hamachta gach layesh. So it says it right over there, and if you look at the pasuk, it actually indicates where it has to be. It says v'lokach molei hamachta gach layesh me'al Mizbeach mil'fnai Hashem. So it's obvious it has to be as close as possible. So that can't be the chiddush that Rabbi Yosy is teaching us, assuming that we want to say this is Rabbi Yosy, right? Ella, what it must have meant to say was, Kol anitel b'fnim, bli nosein b'chutz. What is that referring to? That's referring to the shnei bazicha levoina shalechem apam. Those are taken from the heichal, from the shulchan, and they're delivered to the Mizbeach HaChitzon. Now, why there? It doesn't say anywhere beferish that these bazicha levoina, you have to be marked to them as far to the west as possible, as close as possible to the heichal. That it doesn't say in the pasuk anymore. How do we know that that's taka halacha? The gamri mishirayim. We learn it from shirayim. we have I guess a binyan, just like the shirayim of the dam that you're going to spritz in the heichal. Where do you pour it? On the western side, which is closest to the heichal. So to the bezicha levayna that you're bringing from the heichal into the mizbeach chitzon, it should be similarly in the westernmost portion. Beautiful. What about the other half of the member of Rabbi Yosy? Anita b'chot tinatim b'fnim. Maybe it's referring to not the gecholim of the ketores that was brought on Yom Kippur, but maybe it's the gecholim the chol yoyma v'yoyma. Every single day they took a cholim into the heichal to burn the ketores on the mizbeach hazov. And how do we know that those gecholim have to be taken from the westernmost part of the mizbeach that's closest to the heichal? The garman mi gecholim shel yom kippur. Beautiful. So now we at least know what the Rabbi Yosef's cryptic halacha is, that the shnei bezicha levayna, you have to be marked here on the part of the mizbeach that's as close as possible to the heichal, and the gecholim that you take for your daily ketores burning should also be on the mizbeach in a place that is as close as possible to the heichal. So far, so good. But now that we've got the east-west orientation, now let's focus on the north-south orientation, because Rabbi Yosy said that it has to be placed 4 amas up from the south edge of the mizbeach. What does Rabbi Yosy hold that he makes you push the maracha 4 amas to the north? Now, I want to make it very clear. It doesn't say anywhere on the brisa that we looked at it off that's going to Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Zera was postulating. He wanted to say, the Baal Rabbi Yosy said this halacha of the bringing it close. He wants to say that the brisa is going according to Rabbi Yosy. We're going to get challenged. But for right now, we're going to work with Rabbi Zera, where he wants to claim that the brisa that says that you push the maracha 4 amas to the north, that is following the sheet of Rabbi Yosy. So, Microsoft, what does Rabbi Yosy hold about the positioning of the mizbeach? Because Savar Kula Mizbeach B'darim Koi, if he holds that the full Mizbeach is B'darim, so if the full Mizbeach is B'darim, then what would happen is the top of the Mizbeach would be at the center line of the Azara, right? Because the Mizbeach is physically sitting completely on the south half of the Azara. That means the top of the Mizbeach, the northern edge of the Mizbeach, would be at the center line. So if you drew a line straight from there to the heichal, you would be smack dab in middle of the heichal. It would be perfect. But if you're looking about the lower area of the mizbeach, closer to the south, that won't be connected to heichal. It won't be connected to the opening of the heichal. So let's think about it. Out of the 32 amas of the mizbeach, I have to be in the first 5 amas, in the northernmost 5 amas. Why do I have to be in the northernmost 5 amas? Because it's only that area that the mizbeach is exposed to the heichal. So if I have a mizbeach that's 32 amas, and I have to be within 5 amas of the top of that mizbeach, of the northern half of the mizbeach, what is 32 minus 5? 27. So Frek Gemara, Esrim Visheva Boil Mesi. So I would need to put this maracha 27 amas from the south wall of the mizbeach, so that it would be connected to Pesach Ha'echel. Sorry? That's the problem, right? So you want to say he's going to Rabbi Yosy and he holds 4 amas. Rabbi Yosy wouldn't hold 4 amas. According to Rabbi Yosy, if he holds that the mizbeach was on the south half of the Yazara, it should have been 27 amas, not 4. And if you want to say Kedusha Sechel B'Ulam Chadahi, which gives us extra space, because the doorway of the Ulam wasn't 10 amas wide, which gives us 5 amas on the south half, it's 20 amas wide, which gives us 10 amas in the south half. So all that does is it says 32 minus 10 is 22. So I still need to be 22 amas from the south side of the Mizbeach. As retarti boy mesi. Ve'ika sover chetze b'tzafon the chetze b'darim. And if Rabbi Yosy holds that the Mizbeach is centered smack dab in the middle of the Azara, so the center line of the Mizbeach lines up perfectly to the center line of the door, so then let's make the calculation. If the door of the Heichel is only 10 amas wide, if the door of the Heichel is 10 amas wide, then and that 10 amas, its center line is the center line of the Mizbeach. So then let's think about it. I have to be in the doorway. So from that center line, I could move to the south 5 amas. So the center line is 16 amas of the Mizbeach, right? 16 amas minus 5, because those are the 5 top amas of the Mizbeach that are connected to Heichel. 60 minus 5 is 11. So then Chatrei Boil Mesi. Now I would have to have this Maracha 11 amas from the bottom of the Mizbeach, from the south side of the Mizbeach, so it should line up connected to Pesach, not 4. The Ika Savar, Kedushas Heichel B'ulam Chadam Milsahi. So then I have 10 amas from the 16. So I have to move it 6 amas. Again, 4 amas is not enough. Shis Boil Mesi. Elolaf, the only option that we can have to explain how Rabbi Yosy would only require 4 amas is Mishum de Kasavar Kuloi Mizbeach B'Tzafin. He must hold that the full Mizbeach is only on the Tzafin side. So where do you have 4 amas? V'hani arba amos are Amma Yesoid, the Amma Soivet, the Amma Mokum Kronos, the Amma Mokum Raglei HaKehan. The reason why you need the 4 amas is not because we need it to be Keneged Opati. That's not the problem. The problem is it can't be in the first amma. The first amma is on the Yisoid. Can't set up Maracha there. Can't be the second amma. The second amma is on the Soivet. You can't set it up there. You can't set it up on the first amma immediately on the south side of the Mizbeach, because that's the Makom Kronos. You don't set up anything there. And you can't set it up on the second amma, because that was the walkway that they used to walk around the perimeter of the Mizbeach. So therefore, the southernmost place that's available for use is going to be 4 amas from the south side of the Mizbeach. The chimasku lekamei tvei su lekapesach. And what it's saying is not it has to be a minimum of 4 amas. It has to be a minimum and a maximum of 4 amas. You can't move it more than 4 amas from the south side of the Mizbeach, because then what you're going to do is you're going to bypass the doorway. Because let's think about it. If the Mizbeach is kul b'tzofin, then the first 5 amas of the Mizbeach is connected to the doorway. Once you go more north, you're not even connected to the doorway anymore. So we're forced to push the Maracha 4 to the north. Now it's only going to have 1 amma of exposure to the Pesach oil moed. If you push it even 1 amma further, it's not going to have any exposure to the oil moed. So therefore, we've concluded, the very concludes from here you see that Rabbi Yosy holds that the whole Mizbeach is in the tzafon. Beautiful. I'm sorry? We're saying, well, he's going to have to work with the Kedushas. He'll have to hold, the Meforshim tell us that the Ulam does not have the Kedusha of the Heichel, so therefore you need to be at least connected some part of the opening of the Heichel, which means that you can't push it more than 4. If you held the Kedushas Ulam was the same as the Kedushas Heichel, then you actually have more room to move. You have not a 5 amas. Amar Bada Bar Ava, who said that you have it right? You're making an assumption this is going to Rabbi Yosy, and therefore you have proved that Rabbi Yosy holds Kula Mizbeach B'Tzafin. Who said? Maybe this entire brisa Amani Rabbi Yehudi. Maybe it's going to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda we know holds the Mizbeach B'Tzafin. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mizbeach Memutza V'Oimed Be'emtza Azar. I apologize. Rabbi Yehuda held that the Mizbeach was exactly centered. Ushloishim Mishtayim Amos Hayuloi. It was 32 amos long. Eser amos keneged piska shalecho. Out of the 32 amos, the center 10 amos would line up directly to the Pesach HaHeichel, and 32 minus 10 is 22. So then you have 11 amos of the Mizbeach to the north of the doorway of the Heichel, and you have 11 amos of the Mizbeach to the south of the doorway of the Heichel. So therefore, maybe shloshim shtayis amos hayulon, eser amos keneged piska shalecho. Achas asara amma mikan on the north side, v'achas asrei amma mikan on the south side. Nimtza mizbech muchuven keneged heichel, and now the mizbech is directly centered keneged the heichel. So, Zok Gemara, that wouldn't fit. You know why? Because soif l'Rabbi Yehuda chatzrei boy l'meisi. You still have to push it 16 amas from the bottom. Why? I'm sorry? 11 amas. Why? Because 11 amas from the bottom is where it's now connected the Pesach. As we said, there's 11 amas on either side of the Mizbeach, north and south, that are not connected to Pesach. And then there's 10 in the middle connected to Pesach. So you have to move it 11 amas so the Marecha should be connected to Pesach. You have to move it 6 to the north. So once again, how could you say that this brisa is going according to Rabbi Yehuda? According to Rabbi Yehuda, where is the 4 amas comes from? Zog to Gemara, mi sarvers hani arba amois. Bahade amo yisoid v'ama soiviv. You're telling me that we're counting 4 amas from the yisoid? Of course, we're not counting from the yisoid. The yisoid doesn't come into the question. No one has a havam in that you're putting it there, and no one has a havam you're putting on the soiviv. When we're counting 4 amas, we're counting 4 amas from the top of the mizbeach, which is like 6 amas from the edge of the mizbeach. And if you hold that the kedushas heichel, the kedushas ulam chadam milsi, moving it 4 amas, which is 6 amas really from the end of the mizbeach, lines you up connected the opening of the ulam. So Zog to Gemara, it's arba amos bar my ama yisoid v'ama soive. So right off the bat, we have an option to learn the Mishnah is not going according to Rabbi Yosy, rather it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda. So this is a challenge to Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera wanted to find him a card that Rabbi Yosy holds the whole Mizbeach is bitzafine. And now the Gemara says, no, you have another option. It might be going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Very good kasha. Beautiful kasha. So you're basically doing the same shot. So why does it bother you to say that this is Rabbi Yosy talking? Rabbi Yosy, we're gonna say, oh, maybe that's what he holds, because he doesn't say beferish what he holds. Rabbi Yehuda beferish said the Mizbeach is smack in the center. So it's more logical to say it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda because he specifically said it. I'm sorry if you asked that kasha, because that mamish allows me to, because I struggle to understand the Nukuk Rabbi Yosy. The Nukuk Rabbi Yosy, because you're the same way you're saying in Rabbi Yehuda this shot, you can say the same thing. That's right. Rab Shravi Omar, Rab Shravi says, you know what? There's another Manda Amar could be. Hamani Rabbi Yosy Aglili. As I mentioned earlier, that the Rabbi Yosy of our Mishnah, plain Rabbi Yosy, is Rabbi Yosy ben Chalafta. Maybe it's going to a different Rabbi Yosy, and namely Rabbi Yosy Aglili. The Tanya Rabbi Yosy Aglili Omer, mitoich shenemar v'nosato es hakiyar bein oil moed v'goymer. So where is the placement of the kiyar? It has to be bein oil moed u'bein mizbeach v'nosato shamoyim. Meaning it's going to be a shtickle obstruction between the Mizbeach and the Heichel, because it says it's got to be between the Mizbeach and the Heichel. So we're going to struggle now to understand exactly where the Kiyar was placed. So it says inside the Kiyar, Bein Oil Moed the Goimer, and then it says, there's another pasuk that seems to contradict it, because the other pasuk says, there's Mizbeach Oila, some Pesach Mishkan Oil Moed, meaning there cannot be any hefsek, anything in between the Mizbeach and the Oil Moed. So how could you place the kiyar between the Mizbeach and the Oil Moed and also not have an obstruction between the Mizbeach and the Oil Moed? That's a little bit of a problem, so we're going to have to figure out the placement of the kiyar. Zok to Gemara. So Mizbeach with Pesach Oil Moed, the loy kiyar with Pesach Oil Moed. The kiyar cannot obstruct the exposure of the Mizbeach to the Pesach Oil Moed. So how exactly would they place this kiyar? Beina ulam mizbeach, but moshuch kima klape hador. It wasn't smack in the center, because then it would obstruct the exposure of the mizbeach to the Pesach HaHeichel. But if they moved it to the south of the opening, so then the opening was unobstructed, so the mizbeach had an unobstructed view of the entrance to the Heichel, and the kiyar, which was in between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, but it was in between it, not connected to Pesach. Okay, we'll stop here because the Gemara is going to go to a long list of options to figure out the placement of the kiyar, but the goal at the end of it is to be able to argue that maybe this brisa that says that the Marach is 4 hours up, maybe it's going according to Rabbi Yosy Glili and not Rabbi Yosy, so it's going to be a suggestion to slug up Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera wanted to prove that the brisa is going according to Rabbi Yosy, and Rabbi Yosy holds that the Mizbeach was b'tzafain. The Gemara is going to offer another suggestion. So we already had one suggestion that it could be going like Rabbi Yehuda. Now the Gemara is going to make another suggestion that's going like Rabbi Yosy Glili, but we'll figure out the details Be'ez Hashem tomorrow.
It's so funny because